Venezuela holds the Bolivarian anti-imperialism day to denounce the signing of the so-called Obama decree, which paved the way for Washington to impose unilateral sanctions. Electricity workers in France left the Olympic Village and the State of France without electricity in protest against pension reform. At least 7 people have been killed and 25 wounded after shooting in the northern German city of Hamburg. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Ana Herrero from the teleSUR headquarters in Caracas, Venezuela. We'll begin with the news. Stay with us. So Venezuela holds the Bolivarian anti-imperialism day to denounce the signing of the so-called Obama decree, which described the South American country as an unusual and extraordinary threat to the U.S., paving a way for Washington to impose unilateral sanctions. For this occasion, a meeting was held in Caracas under the title Venezuela, Unusual and Extraordinary Resistance. Several Latin American leaders participated in the gathering, such as former President of Ecuador, Rafael Correa, the Vice President of the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, Diosdado Cabello, and the President of the National Assembly of Venezuela, Jorge Rodriguez. At the event, the three leaders denounced multiple conspiracies carried out by the White House to destabilize and overthrow the Bolivarian government. The President of the National Assembly, Jorge Rodriguez, points out that the government of the United States took advantage of the illness of Commander Hugo Chavez to try to destabilize democracy in Venezuela.
They considered that the illness of Commander Chavez was an opportunity, while the people of Venezuela, while the Bolivarian Revolution was with the commander, fighting the greatest electoral battle ever experienced by these people, which was the electoral battle of the year 2012 for the presidency of Commander Hugo Chavez. Surely there were already executive order drafts, surely there were already files made, surely there were already bureaucrats in the United States saying this is the opportunity to charge the Bolivarian Revolution for having established itself as the first libertarian revolution of the 21st century, and for being an example for the peoples of the world who fight for freedom, for independence, for sovereignty, for the right to manage their resources as they please.
Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador warned that he will advocate calling for a vote against Republicans in the U.S. if the Paris legislators do not cease their desire to call for a U.S. intervention in his country. The presidential world came after Republican legislator Lindsey Graham and John Nellie Kennedy announced on Wednesday that they will present a bill to declare that the cartels that traffic fentanyl and other drugs as terrorists. The measures will allow Washington to activate mechanisms to intervene militarily in Mexico under the excuse of defending its national security.
We are not going to allow any foreign government to intervene, much less the armed force of foreign government to intervene in our territory. From today, we will start an information campaign for Mexicans living and working in the United States and all Hispanics to inform them of what we are doing in Mexico and how this initiative of the Republicans, besides being irresponsible, is lack of respect for our independence and our sovereignty. And if they do not change their attitude and think that they are going to use Mexico for their propaganda, electoral and political purpose, we are going to call not to vote for this party because it is interventionist, inhuman, hypocritical, and corrupt.
On January 9th, one of the most violent episodes during the demonstrations against the government of Dina Boluarte took place in the Peruvian department of Puno. 18 civilians and one police officer died, and more than 100 people were injured due to the police repressions. Relatives of the victims and survivors of that massacre are still seeking justice and reparations. From Juliaca, our collaborator Alejandra Elias with the report.
The ninth day of every month in Juliaca will never be the same, given the fateful events occurred on that date this past January and February, when hundreds of people were injured and 18 people died, demanding justice and asking for the resignation of President Dina Boluarte. All civilian deaths registered in Juliaca were caused by firearm bullets used by law enforcement. One of the victims of the repression was 15-year-old Brian Apasa, a third-year high school student exiting an internet booth and waiting to meet with his mother. Although he was not taking part in the protests, he was hit by a bullet.
Freddy, our older brother, saw live on his cell phone what was happening, that two young men had been shot in Moquegua, Ramon Castilla. He recognized my brother. He called and told me crying, "I think they have shot Brian."
Brian was hit with a bullet in the head. He was in coma for 3 days and died. He wanted to be a policeman when he grew up like his brother. However, after his murder, his brother resigned from his position upon learning that the so-called law enforcement had taken his brother's life.
Our older brother does not want to leave the barracks. He doesn't want to be a policeman anymore because it was the police who killed our brother, who shot him on the head.
A similar story is that of the Aroquipa Hanco family who went to buy food near the airport on January 9th, when Yamileth, a psychology student at the University of Aquino in Bolivia and a volunteer with the Entre Patas NGO, was hit by a bullet. Although her parents took her to a clinic and then to a hospital, Yamileth died. She was 17 years old.
There should be protests, because it is forbidden to use weapons. People will never use those weapons. They are defenseless. The policemen shoot with their guns. It's not fair.
On February 9th, Hernan Silva, 32, was returning home from a family reunion in Juliaca. To get home, he had to pass through the airport. When he noticed that the police started shooting, he stumbled and fell. The last thing he remembers is hearing a shot and an explosion. Moments later, his hand was severed. After 2 months, he's still recovering from the bend.
They didn't just break my hand, which had to be amputated from the wrist. I have a crack in my right leg bone, and the eardrum of my right ear got perforated.
Although 2 months have passed since the first massacre in Juliaca, it is still unknown who is directly responsible for the tragedy, and there have been delays in the investigation.
It shouldn't be that those who have murdered our fellow citizens have not even been summoned or remanded to pretrial custody. It's been 2 months already. We demand justice once and for all.
During Dina Boluarte's government, more than 60 people were killed at demonstrations. Still, protests are increasing and repression is intensifying throughout the country.
Firma desde Perú, Alejandra Elias para teleSUR.
Let's take a very short break now, but remember you can now follow us on our TikTok account as teleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Stay tuned for more news. Welcome back to From the South. On Thursday, the French Senate approved the key article of the pension reform bill that raises the retirement age from 62 to 64. The result was supported by the majority of right-wing parliamentarians who, with 201 votes, gave legal status to the progressive raising of the retirement age. The initiative, promoted by President Macron, also established that in order to obtain a full pension without discounts, required the contribution period will increase from 42 to 43 years as of day until the year 2027. On Thursday, French electricity workers left the Olympic Village and the city of France in the Saint-Denis without electricity to protest against France's pension reform. According to the ZGT union, the action, which also affected gas supplies, is part of protests against President Emmanuel Macron's plans to push about retirement age from 62 to 64 by 2030 and to increase the contribution required for a full pension. In a step up, there's polls on Tuesday with extendable strikes and more media actions after 5 days of peaceful mass protests in January and February failed to get a government to back down on its unpopular reform.
It is a symbolic action because for 2.5 months now, more than 90% of workers and more than 70% of French people have rejected this counter-reform, which will bring the entire French people to their knees. The government refuses to hear, refuses to apply democracy and the majority of the people. One vote, one decision. And so today, what we are saying is that they are working against the general interest of the French people and the country. And so we, at our modest level, try to act to actually force them to respect the will of the people.
It is truly a reform that is unfair and unjustified, and that no one today really understands why the government persists in wanting to pass it. So I repeat it loud and clear: withdraw your pension reform and the public energy service will resume its activity in the best possible way. In any case, our responsibility, we will take it to the end. And for us, as long as the reform is not withdrawn, the actions will rise crescendo tomorrow, after tomorrow, and until the withdrawal.
At least 7 people have been killed and 25 wounded after shooting in the southern German city of Hamburg. According to several media reports, the shooting took place at the Jehovah's Witnesses centered at the Delbourg Street shortly after 9 p.m. local time. Hamburg police tweeted that a major police operation was underway and that they were urgently investigating the background to identify the attackers and their motives. Police spokesman said several streets have been sealed off and the public warned by text message to avoid the area. Local residents were told to stay indoors and only to use their phones in extreme emergency so as not to overburden the network. Russian Defense Ministry spokesman Igor Konashenko claims that all targets have been hit during Russia's retaliation missile strike on Ukraine in response to its recent incursion in Russian Balkan region. Konashenko also claims that during the strike, Ukraine's UAV bases were destroyed and the transfer of reserves and transportation by train of foreign equipment were threatened.
The goal of the strike has been achieved. All the targets have been hit. As a result of the strike, UAV bases were destroyed. Transfers of reserves and transportation by train of foreign equipment were thwarted, as well as facilities for repairs of military equipment and production of ammunition have been put out of service.
During her regularly scheduled briefing, Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova accused France of trying to maintain its exclusive influence in Africa and exclude Russia and China from the region. Zakharova also said the forecast from the United Nations Turkey brokered a grain deal is pessimistic unless both parts of a package deal are fulfilled.
Dreams of maintaining exclusive influence in Africa and excluding other participants, primarily Russia and China, are still alive in Paris. This is obvious. Paris still determines for itself the selected African countries where it is ready to turn a blind eye to military coups and numerous violations of human rights, as long as they blindly follow the official course of France. We are doing everything we can to ensure that the two tracks, the two directions of the deal are fulfilled. In this case, the forecast is optimistic. If it continues to plummet indefinitely in terms of not fulfilling the second part of the deal, then the forecast is pessimistic.
teleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries through SURSAT. Dial 461 and join our Latin American alternative broadcast. We'll find a short break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Local authorities report a shooting in the streets of Tel Aviv, Israel. 3 people have been wounded. The events took place on the Dizengrove streets in the center of the city on the night of March the 9th. It was at the beginning of the weekend in Israel. There were also some rallies against the government of Benjamin Netanyahu. Israeli police call it a terrorist attack. One of the attackers was a man of Palestinian origin. As a result of injuries sustained during the shooting, 3 people were taken to hospital. Pictures and videos of the incident have been circulating on social network sites. Moreover, hours before the shooting, the Israeli armed forces killed 3 Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. In this context, and during his visit to Israel, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin expressed concern on Thursday about a Jewish-led violence against Palestinians and warned against acts that could trigger more insecurity.
And I am here as a friend who is deeply committed to the security of the State of Israel. But the United States also remains firmly opposed to any acts that could trigger more insecurity, including settlement expansion and inflammatory rhetoric. And we're especially disturbed by violence by settlers against Palestinians. So we'll continue to oppose actions that could push a 2-state solution further out of reach.
In Tunisia, coastal authorities, 14 migrants have drowned and at least 54 have been rescued after a boat sank off the country's coast. The boat carried migrants that sank in the coast of sub-Saharan eastern Tunisia. The Coast Guard recovered 14 bodies of migrants and rescued 54 others. The shipwreck comes at a time when many migrants from Sahara-away African countries are seeking to leave Tunisia after the nation President Kais Saied made some remark against illegal migration. After this speech, nationals of sub-Saharan African countries reported an urgent in attack against them and rushed to their embassies to the repatriated. A new incident of violence was reported in Nigeria after at least 37 fishermen were killed outside the village of Gugu. According to the preliminary report, 1,000 fighters believed to be Boko Haram insurgents opened fire on a group of fishermen who were shooting their day's catch on the bank of the river near the village of Gugu. So various groups have reportedly attacked villagers to rob them or because they accuse them of spying for the army or the militia fighting against them. So far, neither the army nor the local authorities have commented on the attack. Nigeria's Election Commission has postponed the West African nation's March 11 gubernatorial election. An official announcement led on Wednesday citing logistic challenges. The election for the new governor from 28 of Nigeria's 36 states will now be held on March the 18th. This decision will allow more time for voting machines used in last month's presidential and legislative elections to be reconfigured and deployed for the upcoming vote. The governmental vote is part of the Nigeria's general elections for 40-year single term for major political positions, including last month's presidential vote won by the ruling party's Bola Tinubu. That outcome is being contested by the opposition. The death toll in Indonesia has risen to 30 after last Monday's landslide in the island of Surasan. Local authorities confirmed the discovery of 9 buried bodies in the village of Panglanga while search and rescue operation continued for 24 people who are still missing. The disaster occurred on March the 16th when a hillside collapsed on a village in the Natuna archipelago as a result of the torrential rains that hit the region. And we have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on our socials. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram as well. TeleSUR English, I'm from the South, I'm Ana Marrero, and thank you for watching.